拉姆蒂三藐三不多谢。
南无萨冷托苏且多也，阿赖和地三藐三不多谢。
南无萨冷多苏且多也，阿赖和地三藐三不多谢。
南无萨冷托苏且多也，阿赖和地三藐三不多谢。
南无萨冷多苏且多也，阿赖和地三藐三不多谢。
南无大方广佛华严经，华严海会佛菩萨。
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 Homage to the Buddha's Flower Garland Sutra of great expansive teachings, and the ocean-wide Flower Garland Assembly of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas.
Homage to the Buddha's Flower Garland Sutra of great expansive teachings, and the ocean-wide Flower Garland Assembly of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas.
无上
甚深微妙法，百千万劫难遭遇。我今见闻得受持，愿解如来真实义。
Unsurpassed, deep, profound, subtle, wonderful Dharma in 100,000 eons is difficult to encounter. Now that I come to receive and hold it within my sight and hearing, I vow to fathom thus on one's true and actual meaning.
宣公上人、两位沙弥，还有各位佛友，大家阿弥陀佛。今天是2013年3月16日，星期六的晚上7点半。那么在加州伯克莱圣寺，今天我们大家一起来研究《大方广佛华严经》。那今天是主要是十地品的第4地。叫做宴会地。
Venerable Master, 2 novices, all Dharma friends here tonight. Tonight is 2013, March 16th, Saturday, 7:30 p.m. We're here in Berkeley, California, at Berkeley Buddhist Monastery, and we're investigating the Flower Garland Sutra, the Avatamsaka Sutra, 10th ground chapter. And right now we're on the 4th ground of the 10 grounds, called the ground of blazing wisdom.
所以请大家打开第14页，在中间这一段。
Can people please open the sutra text to page 14, 15? We're in the middle of the page.
在开始进入经文之前呢，我想很简单的把这个这个10地，还有第4地宴会地根据我自己个人的见解跟大家分享一下。那我们都知道，《华严经》呢有很多不同的位阶，所以呢，这个菩萨呢是从很基础的每一个位阶，很有次第的，按部就班的来修行。那么，如果菩萨呢要进入《华严经》的修行次第的话， 首先呢，他会从实信位开始，就是呢对这个《华严经》的法呢，他开始生出信心了。我们都知道这个信为道源功德母，就是修道的一个根本。那也就是你的根基。如果没有信呢，那这个佛法大海啊，你就进不了了。为什么呢？因为佛法呢，像唯智能入啊，唯信能入啊，就是你要有信心才能够进入到这个佛法的大海里面。
So, before we enter into the fourth ground, this particular section, I would like to maybe share my own understanding of the fourth ground and the 10 grounds and the Avatamsaka Sutra to give some context to the passage tonight. We know that in the Avatamsaka Sutra, it outlines a very thorough explanation of the various stages of a bodhisattva. It gives a very step-by-step, very grounded approach to cultivation. So in the Avatamsaka Sutra, the Bodhisattva first starts, the first steps is with the 10 dwellings, the 10 dwellings. And it begins with that of faith. So he starts off with faith. And we know that in Buddhism, there is a quote that says, faith is the source and the mother of the way. Without faith, we cannot enter the Buddha Dharma. Faith is our foundation in cultivation. It's something we can rely on so that we can cultivate.
等到实信位呢修行圆满，菩萨呢就可以进入到十住位了。十住位再圆满，就可以修行十恨位，十恨的这个位阶。那接着呢就到十回向，十回向圆满了，就是开始从十地品开始。那一般人都很清楚，就是说到这个十地品的时候，从初地开始呢，这个菩萨呢就开始进入了一个圣地、圣人的这种位阶了。那么在这个十地品之前呢，这个十住、十恨、十回向呢，都到一个贤人的位阶。中国人讲圣贤，圣贤，那圣人呢，当然比贤人还高一点，就是他基本上有差别的。凡人呢，凡夫呢会怎么样？你有道德有修行，就变成一个贤人；到贤人呢，你道德具足了，就变成一个圣人了。
Sorry, correction. So the first 10 stages in the Avatamsaka Sutra is the 10 faiths. So you start with faith. After the 10 faiths, you have the next 10 stages, which is the 10 dwellings. And after the 10 dwellings, you have the 10 practices. Then you have the 10 dedications. And the 10 grounds chapter comes after that. So you can see each grouping, how the Bodhisattva progresses. People generally do know that in the 10 grounds is where the Bodhisattva develops and becomes a sage. Before that, there's a Chinese word sun and shen, and oftentimes we translate this as worthy for shen, and sun is sage. So before they become a sage, the Bodhisattva is a worthy one, is a worthy person. So ordinary people can cultivate to be a worthy person. And as a worthy person, someone with virtue, you can start perfecting your virtue and making it even greater. And from there, one can become a sage.
所以到十地这样的一个果位的时候呢，基本上呢，这个菩萨呢就已经开始进入这个圣人所修行的这些恨门了，因此是很殊胜的。对我们凡夫来讲，当然也是很殊胜的，因为这个法门呢，本来不是对凡夫讲的，是对着法身大士讲的。那么就是因为佛的慈悲，还有很多祖师，包括龙树菩萨，这么慈悲，把《华严经》从龙宫带到这个世间，所以我们才有这个机缘来读《华严经》或是听《华严经》这样的一个大法。
So we can see that this level of the 10 grounds, these are the practices of the sages. They are extremely, you could say, extremely lofty and extremely wonderful. They're something that's very admirable and quite amazing. And so it was taught for the great bodhisattvas, you can say the great Dharma Knights. However, here, we as ordinary people have the opportunity to study it ourselves. And this is only because of the kindness and work of the great Buddhist masters and patriarchs, especially Nagarjuna Bodhisattva, who went to the Dragon Palace and brought the Avatamsaka Sutra out. So here that we have an opportunity to study it.
这个在华严法会上，就是佛成佛的最初21天的时候，佛就是讲这一部《大方广佛华严经》。可是有2句话呢，就可以形容出说这个《华严经》呢，我们现在可以听到了，这是无比的殊胜。为什么呢？因为佛在讲《华严经》的时候呢，二乘人、声闻缘觉，他们听不到、看不到，所以叫做有眼不见如舍那，有耳不闻圆顿教。因为佛是现一个如舍那很庄严的千丈如舍那的报身来讲这个《华严经》的，但是呢，这些声闻人，他们有神通，可是也看不到。那么耳朵呢也听不到，这最圆满、最钝，就是根基最利的上根可以听得法，他们也听不到。但是现在呢，佛入灭了3000多年呢，我们居然还可以听到，还可以读到，那可见呢，大家的这种因缘或是根基呢，不会输给这些声闻跟缘觉。
So we know that the Buddha spoke the Avatamsaka Sutra after he awoke. For the first 21 days, he spoke the Avatamsaka Sutra and hosted the Avatamsaka Dharma Assembly. It is said that we can describe this Avatamsaka Sutra in 2 words. You can say it's unsurpassed. The words unsurpassed and supreme, but it would be 2 words connected. So it would be extremely unsurpassed, wonderful, wonderfully unsurpassed. Yeah, that'd be wonderfully unsurpassed. Why is this? Is because there is another saying that says, although they had eyes, they could not see Nishai Ananda Buddha. Because although they had ears, they couldn't hear this immediate, sudden, and complete teaching, which is the Avatamsaka Sutra. What this was referring to is those of the 2 vehicles, the sound hearer disciples as well as the Pratyeka Buddhas. They were unable to hear these teachings. Although they had spiritual abilities and spiritual powers, they still did not have the causes and conditions to be able to learn this and hear this sutra. So now we are here much later and have this opportunity to study this text. And so our own causes and conditions and our roots of goodness, you can say, is not less than those sound hearer disciples and Pratyeka Buddhas who did not have the opportunity to study this text.
那么这个现在是第4地，叫做宴会地。如果用中文来解释的话，也是很有意思的啊。我知道这里讲经呢都是用英文，那今天呢比较特别啊，你们可以听中文，也可以听英文。那这个焰呢就是火焰，慧呢就是智慧。那火焰跟智慧有什么关系呢？当然火焰就代表光明，在佛经里头，光明呢就代表智慧，黑暗呢就代表愚痴。那既然是焰慧了，火焰了，已经有这个光明有智慧了，为什么又有一个慧呢？其实呢，这个就代表说这个火焰呢，还有智慧，就是火焰呢，它可以灭什么烦恼心？烦恼就像那个木材一样，柴火。那就你用这个智慧的火焰呢，把你烦恼这些心就烧尽了。你知道一根火柴呢，点一根火柴，你可以把多少的木头，一座山的木头都可以烧光的。所以你只要生出一点点的智慧，你就可以把无始劫以来的愚痴给灭了。这个就是佛法不可思议的地方。所以这个宴会地 他的意思就是说，我们智慧的火焰可以把我们的这个烦恼的这个心火、心财呢，给灭尽了、烧光了，你的烦恼就没了。
So the title of this ground is called the Ground of Blazing Wisdom. So tonight is a little bit special because I know here usually the lectures are in English, but we'll have a little bit of Chinese tonight, so people have an opportunity to listen to some Chinese. So this title, this name of this ground, Blazing Wisdom, the first word blazing refers to the blaze of a fire. Now, what's the relationship between a fire and wisdom? Well, I think people know fire puts out light. And in Buddhism, light is often associated with wisdom. And darkness is associated with ignorance. So here, the blazing is referring to wisdom. Now, why is there another word for wisdom there too? Well, it's because this is a blazing wisdom. That if you think of another analogy, that our afflictions are like kindling or tinder or wood, then this blazing wisdom burns up our afflictions, burns up our worries and concerns and suffering. And even if you think about a fire, even a mountain of kindling and tinder can be burned up by one fire. So here, this blazing wisdom can burn away our beginningless afflictions, a mountain of afflictions, and it just burns away, so that we end up with no afflictions.
所以呢，不管你研究这个经典，不要有分别心。像刚刚我讲这个实地品呢，已经到圣人啊，就是圣人的这种位阶了。那你不要贪了，说这个是圣人的，所以我来学啊，不需要的。你在这个凡夫地位的，包括贤人地位的，你从基础去修，其实呢，就像我刚刚讲的，你从中得到一点智慧了，你智慧生出来了，你这个所有的烦恼就可以根据这智慧来灭了。如果你到实地品，你还不能从这个文字般若啊，这个就是我们的经典里头呢，把这个文字呢转成智慧的话，那你学实地品呢，学再多也不生作用的。所以呢，基本上这个学佛呢，就是要把这种转识成智，把我们这种识分别啊，这种心呢，把它转成智慧了。转成智慧呢，它作用就大了。就像我刚刚讲，啊，那个一根火柴呢，把一座山这样多的这个木头呢，都可以全部烧毁了。那因此呢，这个不需要在这个说，我今天跟你讲这个啊，这个实地品呢有多好了，你就要执着说，那以后就读实地品了，其他不读啊，这是一个不正确的观念。
So here we have an opportunity to study the Avatamsaka Sutra. Now don't start discriminating and say, oh, because this is the sutra of a sage, I'm going to get greedy and I'm going to want to study this one and not other texts. Don't have this kind of greediness. Rather, we want to recognize where we are at in our own place, in our own cultivation, and start where we are, but apply the teachings to ourselves. And so that we can develop some of our own wisdom, so that we can go step by step. And what's important is to take the literary prajna, the literary wisdom, and be able to really reflect on it and make it our actual wisdom, to actualize it. So don't just read the text, but actually reflect on it and make it actualize it. The Buddhism often teaches or is concerned about transforming our conscious discrimination and transforming that into wisdom. So that's the goal of Buddhism. So we want to be able to develop some wisdom, and once we can develop some of that wisdom, then we can understand how to use it. And it's just like a little bit of wisdom, we can burn up this huge mountain of afflictions, just like that. So here, don't give rise to an attachment. Don't have an attachment. Say, oh, because this text is so wonderful, I'm not going to study anything else. That would be not a right approach either.
这一段，上个礼拜是讲到最后2句的，那我想我们要把它连接起来，所以呢，我们多读1句，就从救一切世间心，那大家一直读到 底下这一段的第3行，就是说得说者意我们就先到这里停一下。那现在呢，首先呢，我们先读一遍中文，大家一起读。接着呢，清伟师会带大家来读英文。
So we'll read the sutra text now on page 14. Where we'll start
is in because last week the Dharma speakers didn't quite finish the section. We will start with one line where they left off, before where they left off. So it starts with 就一切世间. So it's the second last line in the second paragraph. And we'll start from there. 就一切世间心. And then we'll end on the end of the third paragraph with 得说者意. So we'll read together, and afterwards we'll read the English together.
好，请大家合掌。就一切世间心，恭敬尊德无为教密心，随所闻法皆善修其心。此菩萨知恩，知报恩，心即和善，同住安乐，直直柔软，无愁临恨，无有我慢，善受教诲，得说者意。
English.
So we will be starting with the line, a mind of rescuing all worlds, and ending on the third paragraph. A mind of rescuing all worlds, a mind of revering honored virtuous ones and not opposing teachings and instructions, and a mind of according with the Dharma he has heard and skillfully cultivating all of it. This Bodhisattva knows kindness that has been rendered him, and knows to repay that kindness. His mind is receptive to the good, and he is pleasant to associate with. He is upright and gentle, not difficult. He is free from pride, accepts teachings and advice easily, and quickly grasps the intention behind things people say.
就一切世间心。这个就是菩萨跟声闻人不同的地方，因为菩萨要行菩萨道，那么声闻人呢是只度自己，只利益自己所以呢跟菩萨这种自利利他是完全不一样的。因此呢，菩萨呢知道这个世间很苦，要解脱，他自己知道了，也有法门了，也知道怎么做了。回过头来呢，他要发菩提心，也让所有的众生，世间上受苦的众生都能够知道什么是苦，用什么方法可以解脱这个痛苦，可以呢不再受这个轮回，那就是菩萨要入这个世间了。所以呢，菩萨是不舍众生的。
So the first
is a mind of rescuing all worlds. So right here is a place where the Bodhisattva is different than that of a sound hearer or voice hearer disciple. Because the Bodhisattva would like to rescue all beings, while that of a voice hearer disciple is, or Shravaka, say Shravaka disciple, is just out to rescue himself, is only benefiting himself. So the Bodhisattva recognizes that everybody is suffering and wishes to pull everybody out of it, and has a Dharma method and has made the Bodhi resolve, and now knows what to do to relieve everybody of suffering. So that's what he's cultivating, is to rescue all beings.
菩萨的不同点就是他呢不自私，也不自利的，他有好处了，那也要众生得到这个好处。而且菩萨是以众生来作为他一个修行的主要利益的对象。所以即使在这个 普贤黑眼品，大家也会读到，就是说，在这个生死旷野当中，有一棵菩提树王。这个菩提树王呢，枝叶花果，悉皆繁茂，所以就有一个譬喻了，就是在生死旷野当中呢，有大树王。那这个大树王呢，这个根是什么呢？就是众生，它的根就是众生。那这棵菩提树王要长得很高很大，要有花有果，这个根呢一定要深，一定要广，一定要强。那菩萨呢，就以众生呢作为这个菩提树的根，用大杯水来灌溉这个根，所以呢，这个树就长得枝叶、花果悉皆繁茂。枝叶花果代表什么？佛的无上正等正觉，就是说，菩萨如果你要成就菩萨道的话，就必须要从众生来下手，就是他修行的最好的一个对象。那利益众生呢，就是利益自己。所以呢，他把大杯水呢灌溉这个树根上的时候，将来很自然，这个菩提果就长得很茂盛，而且很大。
So then here,
The Bodhisattva also has no selfishness, has no selfishness and no heart to benefit just himself, no self-benefiting. And so he is basically out for the benefit of living beings. He really wants living beings to attain benefits, and that's where he applies his effort. There's a passage in the Universal Worthies Conduct and Vows chapter where this text talks about the Bodhi tree, a great Bodhi tree. And this analogy explains this great Bodhi tree is just like the Bodhisattva's cultivation. And the analogy says, what makes up the roots of this great Bodhi tree? Well, the roots are living beings. The living beings are the roots. And from the roots grows the tree. And so the tree, to be very tall and to be very fruitful and have fruits and flowers and be very lush and have great foliage, the roots have to be deep and broad. And in this analogy, the text goes on to say how those roots are nourished by the great water of great compassion. So the Bodhisattva uses great compassion to nourish the roots. And from there, by nourishing those roots, then the tree can grow. And the fruits and the flowers of the tree, what do those represent? They represent Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, which is the complete awakening of the Buddha. So for us who wish to strive to have this realization of the Buddha, this is the best place to apply effort, to benefit living beings, to apply great compassion to all beings. And naturally, the awakening, Bodhi, will come to fruition by itself.
我相信很多人也读过《六祖坛经》，那么在《六祖坛经》上也讲了，佛法在世间不离世间觉，一世觅菩提，恰如求兔角。这就是说，这个佛法呢，并没有离开这个世间，在我们的日常生活当中呢，就是让我们来修行、来觉悟的。举个最简单的例子，比如说呢，也许你学佛了，你觉得说，我呢不应该再发脾气了，那你就尽量的控制自己不发脾气。当然，如果你把自己每天呢关在一个房间里头呢，没有人呢跟你作对， 也许呢你的脾气呢不会被引发出来，因为没有这个外缘。但是呢，如果你走到外面，你碰到一个不如意的事情了，或是你最不喜欢的事情了，这个时候你的脾气会被引发的，只是你不知道而已。那所以呢，世间上有很多考验，这是很实际的，就是说你面对的时候呢，你就会知道说，你的这个修行呢，是不是经得起考验？那你没有经过这些实际的考验，你就是自己抖起来修行，那是不可靠的。
So there's a passage in the Six Patriarchs saying that that awakening is not apart from the world. So the Buddhism is not something that happens outside of reality, outside of our everyday experience. For instance, if we make a resolve that I'm not going to get angry anymore, and we do all sorts of ways to control our anger, if we just hide away in our room all day and don't go out to meet anybody or see anybody, then maybe we don't have any anger because we don't get angry because we don't have the external conditions that cause it to come out, that bring it out. However, the moment we go outside and we start engaging with others again or seeing others again, our anger comes right out again, and although we might not know it. So this is where we really need to apply our effort and cultivate. In cultivation, we will have many tests from the world, and it gives us an opportunity to see how is our cultivation really going. We can see how we, for instance, really dealt with our anger or not. It's not about just hiding away and trying to avoid our anger from coming out, but rather to really address it and see how well we really cultivated to remove our anger.
我们常常听到上人讲到这个，在修行上啊，最难断的，就是淫欲心。那事实上是这样子的，没有错了。我相信每个人都可以体验出来的。这个淫欲心真的很难断。所以，其实在中国，这个孔老夫子都讲了：“食色性也。”人呢，天生呢，你一生下来，不用教，这个都懂了。啊，你看那个小孩子一生啊，他就知道要喝奶，要吃妈妈的奶，不用教的。这种色呢，也不需要教了，长大了，到一个年纪就懂了，所以很难断。那所以有一个故事呢，也可以大概来讲一下，就是说，形容一下，就是说，如果我们这个修行呢，你没有去面对考验的时候，那又是一个什么样的现象？
So the Venerable Master also often taught that the most difficult desire to cut off or to get free of is that of sexual desire. In China, Confucius has a saying that the most basic desire is that of food and sex. This is something that no one has to teach a young person and teach anybody, but everybody knows it. So this is very obvious. When you look at a young baby, they already know how to drink their mother's milk. And at a certain age, people start engaging sexual activity or have thoughts of sexual activity and sexual desire. So this is something that is inborn. You can say it's inborn, and is very difficult to get free of, to cut off. So here's another story which illustrates the principle of cultivation and how if we don't meet up to the tests that we see every day.
这个有一个老和尚呢，他收了2个小徒弟，徒弟呢很小，就是大概才几岁了。那么这个师父就想说，这个孩子呢都没有跟这个世俗呢接触，那是最纯洁的时候。为了要保护他们呢， 就想把他们带到深山里头去修行。那跟着师父呢，就住了10几年了。等到这2个小徒弟呢长大了，10几岁了，快成人了，师父就想呢，带他们到这个城里呢去考验一下，到底他们的修行呢经得起经不起。这个小徒弟呢一直关在深山里头没有见过世面，到城里什么都好看，什么都好奇，从来都没有看过。那因为在山里面只有跟师父住在一起，也没有看过女人。看到女人的时候呢，他们好奇，就问师父说：“师父，这是什么啊？我没有看过。”这个他们师父呢也不回答，说是女人，就告诉这2个徒弟，这只是一个故事我们不要有分别心，好不好啊？我讲下去的可能没有任何的不好的意思虽然这是一个讲经的法会。那师父就说：“哦，这是吃人的老虎。”而徒弟呢就以为呢，女人呢就是叫做吃人的老虎，所以呢等到回山上了，那师父呢就问他说：“你们呢今天到这个城里那你们觉得什么最好看呢？”2个徒弟不约而同说：“吃人的老虎最好看。”当然，这个我们把它当一个笑话来看也好，然后我们来自己回光返照也好，都可以的。其实呢，我们也知道这个修行在这一方面很不容易，因为它是一个天性，有那个好奇心。所以呢，菩萨在这个世间修行有很多的好处，因为考验很多考验越多，菩萨将来的成就是越大的。否则呢，你很多人是温室的发抖，那就是耐看了，这个实质上呢，等到碰到这种风雪的时候呢，他呢就受不了。
So the story goes, there was an old monk who took on 2 young disciples. These young disciples were still, you can say, very young, just a few years old. So he thought to himself, well, they're so young, they're still very innocent, they're very pure, and haven't been, you can say, polluted by the world's, all the various worldly things. So he said, I'm going to go to the mountains and bring them there to keep them pure and protect them. So he went with them to the mountains and kept them there for over 10 years. Now one day, after over 10 years, he thought, I'm going to bring them out to the city to go take a look and see how their cultivation has been going, to see really what's on their minds. So he comes with these 2 disciples who are now teenagers, almost adults. So he takes them outside and they come to the city and everything is new. They've never seen the city before. Everything to them is new. They've only been in the mountains with their teacher. So they've only seen the teacher. And so they visit and they look around. And of course, they've never seen women before. So they ask, what is that? What is that? We've never seen that before. What is that? And so their teacher responded back. Now, don't take offense here or have any sense of discrimination. This is just kind of a story for people to kind of reflect on. So it's a little bit funny, but the teacher said, "Well, this, which is the women, are called human-eating tigers," and so. The 2 young disciples, of course, didn't know anything. So they said, "Oh, so these are human-eating tigers." For them, these were human-eating tigers. So when they got back to the monastery, the teacher asked them, "So what was the most attractive thing? What was the most beautiful thing in the city? What caught your attention?" He said, "The human-eating tigers. They're the ones that were the most interesting." And so you can see it. This is a little bit funny, a little bit of a joke, but still there's some principle there. It shows how deep this desire is and how inborn it is. And however, the Bodhisattva though, when he cultivates when he's in the world. He doesn't go outside and leave it. He cultivates it because through those tests is really where he tests himself. And by going through the tests, then he's able to really forge himself in his cultivation.
那么在这一句经文叫"救一切世间心 为什么要救？因为众生苦嘛，菩萨才要救。所以呢，菩萨要发的是大悲心，因为悲能拔苦，把这众生的苦呢给拔除掉了，他就解脱了。可是问题是，众生呢，其实呢，在苦里面呢，自己不知道苦的，因为我们在娑婆世界，我们的这个记性不是很好的。你苦一下子，过2天呢，这个乐来了，你又执着在乐了，你觉得不苦了。所以要度这个众生不容易啊！你说哦，这个世间很苦，你跟他讲3苦8苦啊，这个无量诸苦，这个讲一讲呢，等到他在受乐的时候，他根本听不进去。所以呢，菩萨呢要度众生，需要很大的这种耐心，还有时候要吃很多苦啊，因为有些菩萨去度人的时候，不是完全那么顺利的，那可能呢也会遭遇到很多这种众生呢，对他很不客气啊，不礼貌，或者是呢反过来侮辱他，都可能的。那么所以呢，菩萨呢这个必须呢要有非常非常的超乎常人的忍耐心，然后呢他也要知道自己也要受苦。因为他要面对这些苦，众生的苦就是他的苦，但是他要把众生的苦给拔除掉的同时呢，众生也会给他苦来受的。所以呢，菩萨这个时候也要受苦，可是这个苦呢，就是在锻炼菩萨的这种菩提心。所以呢，菩萨吃的苦越多，但他不以为苦，就像上人讲的，受苦是了苦，把苦了了，反而呢，这成就会更大。
So in this passage it says that the Bodhisattva has a mind of rescuing all worlds. Now in Buddhism, to try to rescue and save and help living beings and pull them out of their suffering is great compassion. And so the problem though is that rescuing living beings in the world isn't always so easy. Oftentimes living beings are suffering, but they don't even know it. It's because us living beings, we have very bad memories. When we're suffering, we're really suffering. But a couple days later, when we're happy, we're getting some kind of enjoyment, we forget all about the suffering and attach to the happiness. So at that point, the Bodhisattva tells the living being about the 3 sufferings, the 8 sufferings, all the limitless sufferings. The living being doesn't even pay attention to it, can't hear it. They just ignore it. And so the Bodhisattva really has to cultivate patience, because living beings' memories is just so short, and they just run right after the enjoyments and bliss without any understanding of what's going on. So they have to bear a lot of hardship, a lot of difficulties, a lot of, you can say, suffering as well, in the sense of really working hard to with difficulty. Because oftentimes living beings can also, you could say, criticize them. They don't really are very grateful for the teachings. They can even be resentful and do a lot of things that are against the teachings. So this Bodhisattva really has to cultivate this enduring, long-standing patience and be able to bear difficulty and hardship, because it's not easy to rescue living beings. And so oftentimes we hear the saying that the Venerable Master said, which is, to endure suffering is to end suffering. So by enduring hardship, we can put an end to suffering. But in fact, the Bodhisattva doesn't even take the suffering as suffering. Rather, he just sees it as part of his job. What he needs to do.
所以这个菩萨呢，在世间行菩萨道，就是在磨练自己，有更大的能力来救一切的世间的众生。那么，其实在中国的儒家来讲，也要讲说，人要受磨练，要受考验的。这个孟子就讲说：“天将降大任于斯人也，必先苦其心志。”就是老天呢，要给一个大的责任来交代给你去做的时候，要让你的这个心智上，你的心还有志向上呢，受到很苦很苦的磨练。
So the Bodhisattva takes all these difficulties and sufferings as an opportunity to train himself. You can say to literally polish himself, so that he can have a greater capacity to rescue all living beings. And in Confucianism, there is a great teacher in Confucianism named Mencius, who has a writing which says, before heaven will bestow a great responsibility on a person, it will inflict upon them great hardship, great difficulty, and suffering.
挠其筋骨，饿其体肤，空乏其身。就是说，让他的这个筋骨呢、身体呢，受到很多这种劳力啊、辛苦啊，做很多事情。那也要让他怎么样？没饭吃，饿肚子，没有体力，让他的身体呢，好像被掏空了一样，就是受到很多种种的磨练。我们都可以看得到，即使像虚云老和尚3步1拜到五台山，大概就是这个样子了。他呢这么辛苦，在路上经历很多危险，也没有饭吃，也快被冻死了，也没有力气了，又生病了，种种境界都出现了。但是以后的虚云老和尚，他的成就更大，就是因为这些磨练的关系。
So the saying says, before heaven will bestow a great responsibility on a person, saying that heaven, you say heaven here is giving something extremely important to someone. Well, they will cause their bones to ache. They'll work them with extremely hard. They have to work extremely hard. They'll tire him out, become extremely weary. He'll have no food to eat. He'll be so hungry he'll have no strength. His body will become decrepit and weak. It'll be extremely, extremely difficult. So before heaven will give a great responsibility on somebody, it'll put him to the test. It'll test him out. An example of this is Venerable Master Xu Ring, or Venerable Master Empty Cloud, when he went on the 3 steps 1 bow pilgrimage to Mount Wu Tai. He, on the road, bowing, endured hunger and cold. He had periods of time with no food. He almost froze to death. But because of his ability to bear it and continue on despite his physical difficulties and all the various hardships, it allowed him to have a great accomplishment in the future.
这孟子呢，继续说。行拂乱其所为，所以动心忍性，正义其所不能。这个意思就是说，当一个人在做事情的时候，老天要考验你，他就让你所有的事情做得不顺利，做的呢很多考验，做的呢让你呢精疲力尽。他目的是什么呢？就是要训练你的忍耐能力。最后的目的叫做正义其所不能。本来这个人没有的能力呢，老天用这种种的磨练考验来增加他的能力，以后他就具足了。所以菩萨呢，救一切世间心也是这样，因为如果不这样，他的菩萨道不会圆满。
So this passage continues to say that the heaven will continue to test this person. How? Well, everything the person does not go according to plan. Everything ends up, you can say, a failure. Doesn't go well. So all these tests, everything happens. And what's the goal? Why would heaven train someone like this? Because by doing this person develops great patience and is able to develop abilities that he never knew he had. So this is what the Bodhisattva here is engaging in, is that by being able to train himself in all things that are extremely difficult, then he can perfect his patience, perfect his practices, perfect his vows.
所以这个宴会地的菩萨呢，他想要把这个菩萨道圆满，就要发这个心，救一切世间心。那么 接着呢，他也要恭敬尊德，无为教命心。对这些很有德行、很值得尊敬的这些大德呢，要很恭敬，毕恭毕敬的。那无为教命心，同时呢，不要违背这些呢大德他的教导。
So here the Bodhisattva, on the ground of blazing wisdom, cultivates the Bodhisattva way to perfection through a mind of rescuing all worlds. The next line says, the Bodhisattva cultivates a mind revering honored virtuous ones and not opposing their teachings and instructions. So here the Bodhisattva looks to people, good people, and honors them, and does not go against their teachings.
其实这个经文上讲的叫做教命心啊，就是这个可见呢，这个菩萨是他遇到这个善知识，真的是善知识啊。就是说，除了教导，还有一种就有一种命令，比较强制的。那我们都知道，这个真正的善知识，他教化众生，不是只有一个方法。你碰到这个柔顺的众生，很柔和，心呢很调顺的，这个众生很容易度啊。你跟他讲讲道理，讲讲佛法，你叫他做，他就去做了，不会违逆的。但是有些众生心是很刚强的，你讲了不一定听了，啊，你很客气的，他呢，可能呢就跟你阳奉阴违了。所以呢，这个真正的善知识教化众生的时候呢，他也不一定完全用一种教导摄受的方式，他有时候会用一种折服很强硬的方式，啊，让这个众生呢能够依照他的这种命令，或是他指定的方向来做某种事情。可是菩萨呢，如果碰到这样一个善知识，用不同的善巧方便在教化的时候呢，他还是不违背、不违抗的。他的心呢，因为已经很柔和了，所以呢，他会遵照这个善知识的教导去做，而且很恭敬。
So here the Chinese character is Jiao Ming Xing, which is basically Jiao Ming is stronger than just teachings and instructions in some ways. It's actually almost like a command. It's like something you have to go do. And so here you can say the Bodhisattva really meets a truly good and wise advisor, a truly virtuous person, and he listens to their teachings. I believe everybody knows that a good and wise teacher doesn't just have one method of teaching. They have, you can say, supple, more gentle teachings and more hard teachings. The gentle teachings, for some living beings, they have a very kind of according mind, a very compliant mind, a very gentle way about them. So if the teacher just tells them to do something, they go and do it. They don't fight. They're not stubborn and hard. But there's other living beings that are extremely stubborn and hard and very difficult to teach. You tell them to do something, teaching the Buddha Dharma, they won't listen. They don't listen. They'll even go against it. They'll even go against you or not want to listen. They just pretend they don't listen to hear. And so in this case, a good teacher also has you can say a harder method. They can use something that's much more forceful, so that it gives the living being the right direction to move in, to cultivate. So sometimes it's a harsher instruction, a more harsh teaching. But the Bodhisattva, even when they're hearing this harder kind of teaching here, does not go against those teachings, does not give rise to any kind of wanting to not be able to accept it. Rather, they accept it because their minds is already very supple and very flexible, and they're very willing to listen. And not just that, they're not just listening to listen, they're still very respectful to the teacher.
那么宴会地的菩萨呢，不但不违背这个善知识的教导或是他的命令， 同时呢，他随手闻法，皆善修行心。他听到善知识教导什么样的法门呢？他完全的没有这个任何的意见啊，或是任何呢这个反对，或是觉得呢不合理，他就完全照这样的一个教导法门呢去修行，而且呢把它修行得很好。所以呢，就可以从这里就证明呢，菩萨在修行过程当中呢，对所有的这个大德呢，都要恭恭敬敬的，而且呢要依教奉行。那这样的话有什么好处？第一个，当然你可以从善知识得到真正的了生脱死的法门，因为善知识的教导是善巧方便的。第二个呢，菩萨呢，因为面对顺逆的，就是说，当善知识用一种很柔和的态度来教导他的时候，他也可以接受；当用一种很严厉的态度的时候，他也可以接受，而且呢，都依教奉行。那这样，这个菩萨的心呢，一定会被调柔的，就变得很柔和、很善顺。
So this bodhisattva does not go against the teachings of the teacher, the good and wise teacher. They don't give rise to their own opinions. They don't have this mind of wanting to fight it. They don't say, oh, this is not logical or rational and don't want to do it. Rather, instead, they really take in the teachings and apply effort in cultivating it. And they don't just do it a little bit. They really do a thorough job and do a very good job in cultivating it. So the bodhisattva here really applies the Dharma. And they're extremely respectful to the great teachers, the good and wise advisors. Why is it important to do that? It's because good and wise advisors really teach how to transcend birth and death, how to be free of birth and death. And so the good and wise advisor, regardless if the teaching is gentle or harsh, this bodhisattva can accept it and put it into practice. And so what this does is that by taking in both the teachings that are harsh and softer, the bodhisattva's mind becomes very, you can say, develops equanimity, becomes very level. You know, it's all the places are leveled out. So he's very, very doesn't have all the sharp parts.
所以在经文前面也讲到说，菩萨到第四地，因为修习种种诸道法，他可以得到润泽心、柔软心、调顺心。根据刚刚这样讲的话，当然呢，菩萨在透过实际的修行的时候呢，他就可以真正的得到这些所谓的柔软心跟调顺心了。
So we can see that in this passage before, he has a mind that is a kind and nourishing mind, a compliant and yielding mind, a mind that is a blending and according. We can say, that follows and accords. And so this bodhisattva, when he really cultivates, really can achieve these kinds of minds.
在孟婆城呢，有一位法师啊，他有跟我讲一点他的经历。在92年的时候呢，因为他犯了一些错，所以呢，上人呢就很严厉的来处罚他。那时候有一个无遮大会，他跟我讲，每天要跪4-5个小时，很辛苦的，而且要忏悔，连续很久，天天的。但是呢，他知道这个上人呢是悲心，要让他能够呢因为这个犯的错呢，这个罪呢能够灭除，所以用最严厉的方式来教导他。那这个法师呢，当时呢完全依教奉行，没有第二心的，没有这个违教命心的，就是说上人怎么讲，他就怎么去做。他就跟我讲，真的是。那个4-5个钟头，我们跪看你就知道了啊，多辛苦。但是对他来讲，经过了20年了，他还是感恩上人。他说，如果不是上人这样教导他， 用这么严厉的态度，他犯那个错误，不晓得要怎么，将来会什么果报。那么，所以一个有德行的善知识，当他在教导人的时候，不管他用什么法门，那么呢，这些被教导，他很愿意接受。所以他的根基就在说，你要有德行。所以在经文就讲，尊德，很尊贵、很有德行的这样的善知识，他才能够教化这个第四地宴会地的菩萨。那所以从这里我们也知道，如果我们想教化众生，就像我刚刚讲的，我们要救一切世间的众生的话，那基本上我们先把德行呢要培养好，培养了德行呢具足了，教化众生呢他就比较容易了，而且他可以听受那这样的话，这个菩萨呢在修行或是利益众生方面，他就会做得更顺利，而且可以度化开始更多的众生。所以在这一点是非常重要，就是菩萨自己本身呢，他就要从去恭敬一个善知识，然后不违背善知识的教导来做起。那善知识所教导的法门，他都要脚踏实地的来做，他才有这个能力去度化众生。所以呢，这是一个相对性的关系。
So another Dharma master at the 10,000 Buddha shared his experience with me about, say, difficult teachings or harsh teachings. In 92, he made a very serious mistake, made a very serious error. And so the Venerable Master had him go through a lot of difficulties. He had to kneel from the assembly in a repentance for 4 to 5 hours at a period of time. And he had to do this for quite a period of time, for quite a number of times. And so this is really difficult. But he said that he knew that the Venerable Master did this to him because of out of compassion. And the Venerable Master used this very harsh method on him because that's what he needed. And so he followed along and compliantly went through this repentance. And now 20 years later, he's extremely grateful for the Venerable Master's teachings. Although it was extremely tough and extremely difficult, he knew that because of the gravity of his mistake, if he didn't really repent in this way, that he would not be sure what kind of retribution he would have to undergo for what he had done. So this really requires, you can see, the virtue of the good teacher as well. A virtuous good teacher can then apply the right Dharma door, and those who are undergoing it, who are going to be learning it, are willing to bear it, willing to follow it. But this teacher must have virtue. They must be able to cultivate themselves and embody the teachings. So this is a good lesson. If we want to teach living beings, we ourselves first must cultivate virtue, so that the living beings will even listen to us as teachers. Also, by cultivating virtue, the bodhisattva is able to be more effective in teaching living beings because they will be able to listen to him more. So here the bodhisattva learns and reveres the honored virtuous ones and is not opposed to their teachings and instructions, but instead really follows and puts them into practice in a very grounded and a very straightforward way. And by doing that, he is able to rescue all worlds, the beings in all the worlds, which is the previous sentence. So these are related.
Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, the Rebel Master, Dharma Master Fan, my Dharma brother Chinmay Shi, and all of you good knowing advisors. It is now Novice Koshun's turn to practice speaking the Dharma. So I was looking at today's text as I was preparing for this evening, and one of the lines in the next paragraph caught my attention. The line that says, "He is free from pride, accepts teachings and advice easily, and quickly grasps the intention behind things people say." The reason why this sentence really caught my attention is because I have had a lot of, and still am struggling with pride throughout my life, and especially now when I'm cultivating pride and arrogance. And if I was thinking to myself, how nice would it be if I could embody this sentence, be free from pride and accept teachings and advice easily. I would have been able to escape from a lot of suffering as I was growing up. So looking at myself, at least, trying to understand why when it came to getting advice, I had such a problem. And I found that one of the reasons was that as I went through life, through the experience that I gained, the experience does start, in my mind, start creating walls or boundaries or rules. And what happens with these walls or boundaries in my mind was that it started to set up a perspective of how I would view things and how I would deal with people and situations. So for example, when I was growing up, I was a child of the 70s, and I remember the weekends in my home being filled with music, because my dad would play music when he was at home on Saturday and Sunday mornings, and as well as when we were in the car. I have very fond memories of waking up to the sounds of bands like Carpenter. My father had a very wide taste in music. We had Brazilian music, I think we had Bossa Nova, we even had Cha-Cha-Cha, and John Denver, and country music. And all I remember was having the music fill up the whole home. And I just enjoyed the music for the sake of listening to music. And that's what music is all about. Music is emotional. And I remember that in my teenage years, my young teenage years, I started discovering how I could hook up different hi-fi components. And from there I learned that different components, for example, different speakers, would produce a different character of sound. And that's where I learned that sound can sound different. The same music can sound different from different equipment. And there were ways, because of my nature, there were ways for me to extract. I found that there were ways for me to get better sound. For example, I had a cassette deck, and I realized that if I push a screwdriver into the head of the magnetic head that tracks the cassette, the tape of the cassette, what happens is you can align the head with the magnetic strip to get better sound. And that extended to my adult years. I remember the first time I heard music coming from a CD. The young people here may not necessarily appreciate that. But when you grow up from sound that's analog, there's always a persistent hiss in the background. I used to listen to LPs or records, and you would have the sound of the needle in the groove just before the song starts. I have very fond memories of that. The hiss of the cassette tape, and you would take this for granted until the first time I listened to a CD in my brother's room, who was studying abroad. I visited him. When he pressed play, the only thing I heard was music. There was no hiss. there was no sound to let me know that the music was going to begin. And that to me was, it was just and that to me was a real discovery, just clean music. And that led me on the path to pursue better sound, what some people might call an audiophile. And I started buying equipment when I was working. The point is that this led me on the path where I started deviating from listening to music. So instead of listening to music from an emotional point of view, I started to listen to music from a technical point of view. So listening to music wasn't listening to the music itself, but to the sound that was coming from the speakers, the character of the sound. So speakers had different sounds. I learned that if I changed my amplifier, it had a different sound. And to me, that was when I completely lost the joy of listening to music, because I wasn't really listening to music. I was listening to the equipment that was playing the music, and it was really technical. To the extent that I would not, if I had a favorite song, I would rather not listen to the song if it was played back on, say, a cheap stereo, for example, because the sound would just sound harsh to me. And even a bad piece of music, I would listen to it from a technical point of view on a good stereo. And so this came from first knowing that there are differences in things or differences in people, as in this passage that I'm speaking about. And then from that difference, having a discrimination about what I liked or what I didn't like, or what I thought was better or what was not better. Because if you go into the world of music, or particularly audiophile music, it's really, really subjective. To some people, good sound may, for some other people, be a very harsh sounding sound. So so basically my judgment or my discrimination, or a more elegant word would be discernment. Those by itself are not bad qualities if you use it in a skillful manner. And if you look at today's text on the next page, the last line of the first paragraph, it says, vigor that skillfully distinguishes what is and what is not the path. So discrimination by itself, or discernment, or experience in life by itself is not, there's nothing wrong with that. It's how we set it up. And if we use it in a way that closes the mind and does not allow the mind to expand or to open, then the only people that we harm will be ourselves. Another good example of this would be, as I was growing up, my father had very particular rules about food. He was very choosy about the food that was cooked at home. And one of his pet peeves was that if you added sugar to any dish, that would put him in a rage, and that would spoil the dinner for him. And I had friends like that who when we go out for meals, I had the same experience myself. We went to a restaurant, and all of us felt that the food was really bad, and we didn't really feel like eating it. And there was one friend who was just eating like it was the best food that he has ever tasted. And we actually got angry with him. So, why are you eating that food? I said, why? What's wrong? It's just food. Because his mind didn't have the same discriminations as me or my other friends. So because of that, he was able to enjoy the food as it should be, because food is a resource that not everyone gets to enjoy. But because of our own discriminations of how food should be, that prevented us from 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 nourishing ourselves. And for some people, it is a real sin. I mean, to judge food that's right before you. So I guess what I would like to wrap up would be, in the end, it's not our experiences or our discriminations that are fault, but it's how skillful we use them in shaping how we perceive our surroundings and how we perceive people. It's really easy, for example, myself, it is really easy for me to take advice from someone like Dhamma Master Fan sitting next to me, because I instantly recognize him as my senior, as my elder, someone who fits the mold of someone who has more wisdom than me. It's really easy for me to pay attention, to listen. But what happens if I meet, say, a child or someone who in my mind does not measure up to me? Then I guess that's a real test. And the stories in the Chinese canon, the Chinese Buddhism canon is full. They're full of wonderful stories about how people have met Buddhas and Bodhisattvas who are right in front of them, but they don't recognize them because of their own discriminations. And I'll just share one quick story before I pass the stage to Chin Wei Shi. There was once a cultivator in China who felt that he had attained some skill. And I guess he must have felt that he finally conquered his affliction of temper. So he wrote a sign that said, "A mind like ashes." Some of you may have heard this story before. So he had a sign, "A mind like ashes," and he put it outside his hut. And he was sitting outside his hut. So people walk by and they would see the sign, "A mind like ashes." So along came this person who asked him, "Excuse me, sir, what does your sign say?" And he says, "A mind like ashes." Really cool, really peaceful, really serene. And so the visitor said, "Oh, could you say that again? What does it say?" And he said, "A mind like ashes." I said, "Oh, what did you say?" And this went on, and on, and on, and it must have gone on for a very long time, because if I'm not mistaken, the story started in the morning, and it was still going on in the evening. And this cultivator was still sitting there, looking peaceful, and he kept on answering the same question again and again. A mind like ashes, a mind like ashes. Until there was the last question. It was always the last question. "I'm sorry, what did you say? What does the sign say again?" And this time, his reply was, in a thunderous voice, "If I told you once, I've told you 1,000,000 times. It says a mind like ashes. Are you stupid?" And this visitor then turned into Kuan Yin Bodhisattva, revealed himself or herself as Kuan Yin Bodhisattva, and says, "Well, it looks like you still have some amber in those ashes." So I guess the biggest test for us are the ones that challenge us, and the ones that are easy, of course, then it wouldn't be tests. So I'll certainly bear this in mind next time I encounter a situation where actually I could learn, but it's only my discriminations which prevent me from learning, and I just wanted to share with you.
Venerable Master, Dharma Master, and all good friends in the Dharma. Just maybe share also a few reflections on the sutra text tonight. The text that stuck out to me was the beginning of this paragraph, which is the Bodhisattva knows kindness that has been rendered him and knows to repay that kindness. And the reason that stuck out to me was because I have been working on a project on for one other class that I'm taking at the City of 10,000 Buddhas. I don't know if people know, but Dharma Master Heng Chi was teaching class on the Heart Sutra. And so I've been working on a project to try to turn in the final assignment. And so I've been studying a little bit of psychotherapy and psychology and relating it to Buddhism, and particularly the Yogacara philosophy of Buddhism. But the idea of knowing kindness and repaying kindness is something that I don't know. I guess I felt it's a little bit lacking in the Western psychological framework. Of course, my own experiences are quite limited, so just my own upbringing here in America, there's a bit of a sense of being kind of, we make ourselves, we're like our self-made man, we're independent. You know, especially when you're a young kid, there's a little bit of rebellious, like you can go out and do your own thing, you don't pay attention to your parents, and there's that kind of energy for sure. And oftentimes, you know, I can remember my mind back when I was a teenager, you know, my parents would tell me to do something or something didn't like happened, you know, it would be in my mind be like, that's unfair. Why are you saying that? You're hypocritical, or, you know, what are you doing? I don't want to listen to you. And sometimes I think I was smart and didn't actually say it out loud. You know, sometimes I probably did. But, you know, that was the mind. That was the actual way that my mind operated. And I have to say, it was only until I met Buddhism that this principle even showed up in my world. I mean, we were just talking about discriminations that Guo Shunshi shared, is that I didn't even have that discrimination in my mind before that, really. It wasn't saying, oh, let's see who's showed me kindness, really. It's kind of like, you know, is that fair? Is that something how does that pan out for me? And so the way I discriminated the world was different. So how I saw everything was very different. And so my experience was that that I didn't really see kindness very much growing up as a young person in America. And when I met the Buddha Dharma and I started looking around, I got to see kindness all around me. And when I looked particularly at parents, I could see the kindness from parents. And the reason it connected a lot was because if people know Western psychology, oftentimes, usually the source of most of our problems comes from our parents. It's usually all the case examples I've been reading from the things that they've looked at is oftentimes, you know, the parent was abusive and they messed me up and and that's why I have this fear complex, or that's why I have this anxiety complex, or all these things because something wrong with the parent's upbringing. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be wonderful if it said they shifted a little bit and said, let's reflect on the ways your mother or your father raised you well and you can be grateful for, and let's really investigate that and cultivate that. And I think that's the spirit here in Buddhism, is this Bodhisattva knows kindness. He sees kindness where it happens, in the parents and everybody around him. And not just that, he knows how to repay it. He knows that by receiving this kindness, he knows how to give it as well. And it's something that I believe is very joyful. And I think people who really have this spirit, you see, it's not, repaying kindness isn't like, gosh, I have to give back this debt and it's like an obligation. It's this joyfulness to be able to give back when you really know there's been kindness given. And just to tell a quick story that struck me after I started studying Buddhism, was I have a younger brother who's about 6.5 years younger than me. So I remember one time we were probably watching TV together on the couch, and this is after I started studying Buddhism, and he fell asleep, and he's been asleep for a while, and my father walked by us in a living room, and then a few moments later he came back with a blanket, and he covered my brother. And I said, wow, my father just covered my brother with a blanket. And my mind thought, couple things at that moment was, because my first thought was, I've never really thought my father as a very sensitive person. I've always thought him kind of in his own world. I think people that might have Asian fathers, they're kind of a little bit more reserved, and if you're talking about people issues or things about relationships, he's not really very interested. It's like physics and math problems. You can spend like 2 or 3 hours like talking about it and really getting into like, how many atoms are in this microphone stand, and like now analyzing all the, subatomic pieces. And so I never really thought of my father as particularly sensitive or that element. And so when I saw him do that just so naturally and so like effortlessly, I was like really struck. Wow, that just was a really caring thing my father did. And then so I thought, I bet he did that when I was young too. He did that for me when I was a little boy. And so that really made me reflect. And then another thought came to me, says, why didn't I do that for my brother? I always say that's really repaying kindness, because I'm sure that for parents, having their kids showing kindness to one another would probably bring deep joy to them. And so for me, that was one of the things I think that I slowly learned from repaying about kindness, is being able to see it around me and being able to reflect on how to do a better job in repaying that kindness. And I think in many ways why I'm a monastic now and being able to do that, and my parents have accepted it, because they've seen that change, that I've actually changed in that way. And there's a kind of a goodness to that. So I believe we didn't have a chance to really talk about this whole passage, but this passage really, I think, is quite meaningful. It's talking about this kindness, about being receptive to good, being pleasant to associate with, being upright and gentle, not difficult. I mean, I think that list if we discriminate with that list, we'll probably end up in a really good place. And if we discriminate with some of the other lists in the world that the world provides us, I'm not sure where exactly it ends up. So given that our time's up, I don't know if we want to take questions at all, but that's how I'll just say that much. Amitofo. So, is there any questions? We can see if there's any questions. Otherwise, finish the lecture. Okay. So we have the transference verse is on the back of the dedication of back of the Dharma request sheet, the dedication of merit. So we'll recite that together, and then after that we will bow to the Buddhas and bow to the Venerable Master. Well, next Saturday again. Okay, some brief announcements. So we have next Saturday, which is March 23rd, from 2 to 4 p.m., Madalena Tam will be continuing her Dharma instruments class here in Berkeley, in the Buddha Hall here. And that's a really unique opportunity to study Dharma instruments, because she actually taught the original disciples of the Venerable Master when they started learning Dharma instruments in the 1960s, 1970s, early 1970s. So she has a lot of experience, has been around a long time. Any other announcements? Yes. Yes. So tomorrow, last week we announced that Dharma Master Chi was going to be lecturing tomorrow in Burlingame. That actually has been canceled. So if you know of anybody who was planning on going to Burlingame for a lecture by Chi Fasher, she's not going to be able to lecture. I'm not sure what happened, but it seems like okay. So they won't be having the talk there on Sunday. Yes. So this Thursday we have roundtable. So people who are interested, it's the Chan Meditation Roundtable. It's directed mostly for young adults or students. Maybe we try to keep it, under 35 people. But if people really would like to come and have a very kind of open discussion just around Dharma, nothing too serious, but a chance to really share in an open-hearted discussion. We have that 7:30 p.m. in the dining hall in the back on Thursday, this Thursday. We have it every other week. Yes? Next. Well, I think we're scheduled the next time in April. I think next week the nuns will continue. 他刚刚说他请我们，你听到 ？OK。
Is that a discriminating mind? Is that a discriminating mind?
No problem. But actually, we invited Fan Fasher to come down again on April 13th. April 13th. That's the time right before Reverend Heng Sher comes back on April 16th. So,
just wanted to add the age limit of 35 for the round table is the mental age, not the age of the body.
Yeah. Finally, we have Guan Yin Bodhisattva session starting on March 23rd evening. That's when the purifying boundary happens. So people who want to go to that, and a week after that is a week of Chan meditation. So that's definitely an opportunity. And one more thing, we have a special event here hosted by Ahimsa on March 24th from 2 to 5 or 2 to 4 p.m. We have posters out in front. Ahimsa is a group that I believe was very much involved starting out here in Berkeley Monastery, and is basically hosting an event to celebrate I believe the 150th anniversary of the Swami Vivekananda coming to the West. And so they have a number of speakers coming to speak. So if people have an opportunity and would like to listen to some interesting speakers, it's this Sunday from 2 to 4. But I'm not 100% sure of the time, the ending time, so please look the flyer outside. So am I leaving anything else out? Nope. Okay. So for people who transference. Okay. May every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may their minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light break the darkness of their endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Please stand.